me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the 2018 NFL Draft Prospects 101 series, your guide to some of the biggest and hottest names of the 2018 NFL Draft. We're talking wide receivers, and this is a guy that I heard a lot about going into the college football season, and maybe even in the early stages of the college football season. A lot of people were telling me, hey, you got to check this guy out. What do you think about this guy? And I didn't know too much about him. And again, once the NFL season starts, I've got tunnel vision. So I never really got around to looking at him until the end of the NFL season and when this process began. And I like him. I don't necessarily love him. And so I think that's the feel that a lot of people get when they talk about OSU wide receiver. And when I say OSU, I'm talking Oklahoma State wide receiver James Washington. I think that's the vibe I get from everybody is, yeah, I like some of the things he does. I like some of the things he brings to the table, but I don't necessarily love him. And so I think he does a lot of things really well, but I don't know if he does any one thing great. And so I think he kind of falls into that Pam Mon situation and category, proficient at many, master of none. And when you fall into that category, you kind of get pigeonholed. And so you don't have size, you're not that fast, you're not elite fast at least. And so what do you bring to the table necessarily? And so he does bring physicality. You know, he does have that Anquan Bolden type feel to him. And maybe that could be who he ultimately is at the next level. Now, Bolden was a little bit bigger, but hey, stranger things have happened, right? So let's talk about James Washington and his pros and what makes him a guy that's probably going to come off the board in the second round, if not second, early third of the 2018 NFL Draft. So we start with his pros. His hands are exceptional. I like his hands a lot. I think he's got some really good hands. He snatches the football out of the air. You don't see it hit the ground too many times when it's thrown in his direction. And so from a hand standpoint, I think James Washington gets the job done. And I feel confident that his hands are going to translate at the next level. Acceleration. He's got build-up speed. And so generally when you talk about build-up speed runners, acceleration doesn't come into play. But surprisingly, in and out of cuts in his route running ability, he actually accelerates out of his cuts and breaks. So from that standpoint, he's got some acceleration. Long distance speed wise, he's got acceleration. It's in that intermediate area where you're like, okay, he kind of lacks that ability to run. But in short areas and in little bursts, when he's coming out of breaks and when he's going for the deep ball, there's an acceleration there. So it's weird because he doesn't actually have great quickness and suddenness. Like that's not something that really exists with James Washington, yet he has quick bursts of acceleration, which really doesn't make a lot of sense. But when you watch him, you see it, you're like, huh, okay. That's different for a guy that you say doesn't have great quickness or suddenness. He can come out of breaks really quickly and cleanly and come back to the football. So I don't know. He does some things that on tape you didn't expect from him. And every now and again you go, okay, so he can't do this. And then the next time you watch him, he does that thing. And you're like, huh. But in any event, he's got acceleration. He's got route running ability, which with his frame, the way it's set up, and we'll talk about it. And that's been one of the knocks on him is he's got running back body build and body type. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Usually that makes for a guy that's a little stiff, not as fluid as a route runner, you know. So when you ask, what does that mean? We'll explain later. But he can run routes, surprisingly so. With that frame still, he runs routes really well. He separates, and even when he doesn't separate, strong hands still catches the football. Physicality. I think his physicality was best on display at the Senior Bowl, where he was just tossing guys around. And you know, you get away with that stuff at the Senior Bowl because really they're just looking for competitive spirit. What do you do in one-on-one situations? You can't toss a guy 5 yards in the NFL and expect not to get flagged for OPI. But at the Senior Bowl, where there are no officials and it's just a bunch of scouts and coaches and teams out there, they want to see it. They like that physicality and that ferocity. And he was tossing those guys around and tried to be physical with them and jam them at the line of scrimmage. tossing guys 2 and 3 yards out of the way and catching the football. So I thought you got to see the physicality at the Senior Bowl. I think it was best on display there. And with that physicality comes the toughness. He's not afraid to go over the middle of the football field, take a shot. Sometimes he's the one delivering the shot. And the way that he's built to be able to go over the middle and be physical and do some of the dirty things that some of the other receivers don't necessarily want to do. Leaping ability, high point the football. He'll go up and he'll fight and he'll make some plays on the ball from time to time. Again, with his frame, the way that it's carved out, he's not necessarily going to have a tremendous catch radius per se. But again, every time you say that with him, then he shows you examples of the one thing you just said he couldn't do. And so I was ready to say, nope, can't really jump, doesn't have the ability to go get the football, doesn't have a good catch radius. But then against Baylor, he goes over the middle of the field and his quarterback, Mason Rudolph, cuts one high, cuts it loose, it goes high, it sails on him. And James Washington climbs the ladder, goes up, extends away from his frame, plucks it out of the air seamlessly and comes down and tries to get yards after the catch. And I'm like, huh, didn't know you could do that. And then he throws him up a jump ball in the end zone against one of those teams in the Big 12. None of them play defense, so it doesn't matter. Pick one. He goes up, climbs the ladder, and comes down with it in the end zone. And I go, huh, didn't know you could do that. So every time I thought to myself, nope, no leaping ability, can't extend away from, and he's not an explosive leaper, but he'll go up and he'll compete for the ball that's thrown up high in a 50-50 fashion. And he'll come down with the football that's thrown away from his frame because he's got strong hands, and he'll extend every inch of his body to go out and get the football and retrieve it. So I was actually impressed with his catch radius for his size. Again, he doesn't have extremely long arms, so his catch radius isn't that extravagant, but he does use every inch of his body to go and get the football, and so I can respect that. Ball tracking. To me, he's got the best deep ball hands of any receiver in this draft. And what I mean by that is his hands are late tracking the ball. And that's what you want with the deep ball, because think about it from the perspective of a DB. You're beating on a play 35 yards down the field. The ball's coming. You don't know when it's coming because you can't turn and look. You're beaten by a step and a half. So you're afraid to turn and look. So how do you defend that pass? How do you know it's coming? That receiver looks, eyes get big, hands come out for the football. The later you put your hands up, the later you react to that football coming, the less time you give the DB to try to break it up. Because he doesn't know it's coming, because a lot of times, 95% of the time, DB's in a trail technique, has no idea where the ball is, and he's playing off of the reaction of the receiver. The minute those hands go up, so do his. And so if you put him up late, and the guy that I saw in the league that did this the best was Santana Moss, for me. Santana Moss had the best deep ball late reaction with hands I've ever seen in my life, because football will be there literally in an instant, and Santana Moss didn't put his hands out, catch it, and retrieve it. Doesn't give the DB a chance to defend it when he doesn't know it's coming. So James Washington, for me, does that the best. Puts his hands up, and he had a lot of opportunities to run the deep ball, to go for the 9, to go for the deep post in the Big 12. Again, you know how that goes. And so he was able to make a lot of plays, and you saw a lot of that adjustment to the football late, which is great because it keeps that defender from knowing when the ball is actually going to get there. I love that. So his ball tracking skills are on point. Blocking. He's a guy that I think blocks. He's willing to block. He's physical enough to do so, and I think he does a good enough job of getting in the way. And so I like him from a blocking perspective as well. Dependability and clutchness. A 4th and 1 against West Virginia is a great example of him coming up in a crucial situation, making a big grab. He's a guy that I think, with his hands and how strong they are, and I don't think he gets enough credit for just how strong his hands are. He's the type of guy that you can throw it to and feel like he's going to out-muscle the defender for the football. He gives me that Anquan Bolden, Pierre Garçon type of vibe, where he's just physical, he's tough, and he's a guy you can trust throwing the football to. And so I like that aspect of his game. And so I think that's something that James Washington will bring to the next level as a wide receiver. And in production, 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons at Oklahoma State. Again, it's the Big 12. Again, take it with a grain of salt. You know what time it is in the Big 12. You should be putting up astronomical numbers out there, but still got to go out and do it. He did it. And so his production, top notch when you're talking wide receivers in the 2018 NFL draft. You go from those pros to some of James Washington's cons. Measurables. So this has been the biggest knock on him in the draft thus far, and it's his build. He's got a running back build. His measurables, 5'11", 213, but it's not the size and the weight, it's the way it's distributed that I think a lot of people are like, huh, that's odd for a receiver. He looks like a running back. He looked like he should be getting handoffs and not having the football thrown to him. And what that usually means is you're bottom heavy, and you look at his bottom half and his legs, they're huge, they're thick, sort of like you see with running backs. And normally that means you don't have great change of direction. You're not as fluid an athlete. And so that's why you don't see a lot of guys with that kind of build, because you want that flexibility. You want the ability to change directions and be fluid as an athlete. And when you're built like a running back, that's why running backs don't run a lot of receiving routes a lot of times, because they don't move laterally as good. They're not as consistent with their route running ability, and their body types kind of hinder them from movement skills that would allow them to be as fluid as you would like them to be as receivers. And so he's got that kind of a build that I think a lot of people look at and say, I don't really love that build from a wide receiver standpoint, but he still makes plays, so I'm not going to beat him up for it. Quickness, suddenness, I don't think that's something that he excels at. It's crazy because sometimes you'll see it, but most times you won't. And I think where the quickness and suddenness leaves him is when he has the football in his hands. He's not juking anybody. There's no make you miss. There's not a lot of run after the catch unless he catches it in stride and is able to run away from a defender then. But for the most part, he's not making anybody miss after he gets the football. His speed, you saw it on display in the TCU game, Oklahoma game, the Tulsa game, where he's just running by guys. Again, Big 12 football. But that's with a head start. That's with a guy playing 7 to 10 yards off, which made me throw up in my mouth watching his tape, because how many times are you going to allow this guy to have, and I get it, you're in cover 3, so you don't need to be up close, but damn, how many times are you going to allow a guy to run, eat up your cushion, step on your toes, and then bail on you and leave? Even and leaving. That's the saying as a receiver. We get even, we leave it. And how many times as a corner are you going to allow James Washington, who you've seen on tape, eat up cushion, step on a guy's toes, and then run by him? How many times are you going to allow that to happen to you before you do something about it? And you saw it time after time after time. Him eat up a cushion, step on the toes of a DB, then run the post and leave him right at the stop. And so I just don't understand. I don't get it. But I don't think that speed translates from a underneath perspective. If he catches a drag route, I don't expect him to run away from a linebacker that has an angle. I don't expect him on a dig route to catch a football and be able to separate away from a corner. I just don't see that from James Washington. So I think it's long distance speed, and he's a 4.54 guy, which is fine, but it's not exceptional speed at that size. Versatility. I mean, you get what you get with James Washington. I don't think he can play in the slot. I think he's an out wide receiver, and I think you're limited as to what you can ask him to do. So I don't think there's an element of versatility there. You get what you get with James Washington. You know what you're getting. You're getting a boundary wide receiver. You're getting most likely a 2 in this league, not a 1. So you're probably getting a guy that can play the Y. You're not getting a Z. You're probably not getting an X wide receiver. Depending on how your offense is run, you might be getting an X, not a Z. In any event, either way, he's a number 2 guy. He's not a number 1 receiver, I don't think. I don't think he develops into a number 1 receiver at the next level. But again, we will see. A lot of people probably said the same thing about Pierre Garçon. Probably a lot of people said the same thing about Anquan Bolden. And look what those guys develop into throughout the course of their careers. And to me, he kind of resembles those guys and their skill set. And then you look at sideline ability. Too many times this guy caught the football with a toe or a foot out of bounds and didn't get his other foot in. And that annoys me to no end, because you got to know where you are on the field. You got to be aware of your surroundings and where you are on the football field in relation to catching the football. You've got to be able to get your feet down in bounds. And there were too many times where he could have either fallen and gotten that second foot in, or he had enough space to not overstride, still catch the football and get both feet in bounds instead of overstriding and stepping out of bounds. So I've got an issue with that. I don't love his sideline awareness and ability, so that's something he's going to have to clean up at the next level as well. But James Washington is intriguing for me. I'm anxious to see what he does, because I think he's a guy that when it's all said and done, if you like what he brings to the table and you have a plan for him, he can help you at the next level. So I'm anxious to see what James Washington does at the next level, because he does have a unique skill set. He's physical. He can run the deep ball and go get it, but he's tough. He's physical, and I like that. And so I'll see where he ends up. And I think this guy has some talent. So we'll see what happens with him. But in any event, that's James Washington and his Draft Prospects 101 breakdown. If it happens in the National Football League, you know your man Louie T's got you covered. So remember, we're changing the game, period. Come back and join me as I continue to break down these prospects. We're going to switch gears and now jump into the tight end position. So come back and join me there as I break down the tight end position. And if you want to see his rating and all the other receiver ratings and the running backs and the quarterbacks and all the positions that I've been able to break down thus far, check out the site LouieTNetwork.net to see what I think of James Washington and where he fits among his peers and among the rest of the 2018 draft class. So that's going to do it for me here on this breakdown. I've got plenty more to come, so don't you go away. We're going to switch gears and go to another position, and then we're going to hit the defensive side of football. So we're going to get into this draft, into the meat and potatoes. So don't you go anywhere. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. I'm your man Louie T. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.